I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order.
And here's your water.
First thing we have is a 2024-2028 budget approval that could not be approved at the regular budget meeting because there was not enough council members present when one person had to abstain. And this is 575-0350, which is the MCRC capital. Keith, this is just something that we have to do, right? Correct?
It is. This is in accordance with the joint operating agreement. We make an annual contribution. It does increase, you can see in the budget, because we had an amendment to the joint operating agreement since the last budget. It's going up by 10,000 a year, and then until it gets to 150, it was 100,000 previously.
Anybody have any questions on that? I know that Mr. Shields will have to abstain.
Correct, since it involves my employer. That's the one I could not vote on.
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we move on to the Finance Committee. The first item we have is assignment for request for council action. We have several for the Finance Committee, 23108, Communications Radio Council upgrade for the police, 23109, Communications Dark Fiber Services Agreement and service fees for the police, 23110, Fiscal Year 23 CDBG allocation grant, 23111, increase PO 23170 RNT Fence Inc. for the Parks Department, 23112, cooperative purchase for the 2024 Mack TE front loader for sanitation. 23113, increase PO 230930, Wing and Lake Erie Railway Engineering. 23114, increase PO 23840, Rocco Masonry for the Streets Department. The next item we have is 18138, consider legislation prohibiting feeding deer and wild animals. Mr. Lamb, this came out of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a meeting last week and reviewed this legislation again. As Councilman Rose pointed out to me, I had the date wrong. Correct me again if I'm wrong, but I think we started this discussion in 2018. Is that right? We started this in 2018, went over the draft a number of times, took a break from it, came back to it again, attempted to write a draft an ordinance that would help to alleviate issues that deer damage that deer can do in neighborhoods and in yards. Attempted to do language that was would not create a diverse or disagreements with neighbors or a tension between neighbors. One neighbor, reporting another neighbor. Tried to make the language be somewhat flexible in a way. And my understanding at the conclusion of the meeting that we held on this last week, the committee meeting, was that we had arrived at a proposal that would be a good backstop for issues that are pretty serious, where where a nuisance occurs or damage to someone else's property related directly to somebody feeding deer, nearby or in proximity. And that was the conclusion. It was voted on. It was voted up 2-1. The other two members of the committee, Councilwoman Hazeltine and Councilman Rose, voted yes. I voted no. Each of us have a difference of opinion. But the ordinance it's not a bad ordinance. It's well written. I appreciate the work that the law director did on it to draft it in such a way that it could be some help to people. I am not concerned. I'm not certain that it's overly enforceable. I am certain that it will not help resolve many issues that I think people feel that they have. But I think that it was voted out of committee and it deserves to be here, and I'm presuming then that we'll just pass it tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Huber, do you have anything to add since this kind of deals with the legal part of it? All right, anybody have any questions or comments on it, on council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rose?
one thing, if you look in the notes passed on from Kathy from last week's meeting, excuse me, I did suggest that we put some sort of, I don't know if it's a height restriction or what to be the best phrase, because I have pictures of my deer eating out of my neighbor's bird feeder. So if we could raise them up, in such a way that the deer can't get to them, that would be one suggestion. So we're not, we're just feeding birds and not other animals.
Right, I think the goal with any kind of new legislation that we try to adopt is we try to help solve a problem. And again, we are tasked with multiple things. I think, as you know, we tried, at least specifically, that this is all derived mainly from deer, but other wild animals. I think Wadsworth passed an ordinance dealing with somebody was feeding skunks, and that would probably be a bigger problem. But I think they passed an ordinance that was a lot broader than this one, of course, because it included many other animals too. I think it even included what we dealt with wild, our feral cats and, you know, wild dogs. I think that theirs included that, but, you know, we went through that process. So, I mean, anything that can help. Now, will it help? I don't know, but can it help? Possibly. You know, I think I'm supportive of that because we got to come up with multiple ways to solve the problem. And this may be another way that we're able to address an issue if there is a problem that is causing damage to neighboring properties. You know, I get it, there has to be a solution for that because one neighbor's problem can't become another's, and there has to be reasonableness involved in it. Maybe discussions will be had first before action taken, and hopefully that'll resolve the issue. But if it doesn't, I get it, you have to move to the next level. So I'll be in support of it just so we can move the ball forward and try to help solve the problem that we are wrestling with in this city, specifically with deer. I mean, we have to do something. I don't know the answer with you, with your request, Mr. Rose, about raising the bird feeders. Now, a lot of people who feed birds, you know, maybe they can't reach as high, or there's no mechanism for their bird feeder to be higher because they buy pre-existing or sold items that are only so high. I don't know how you would change that. So I don't know if that'll solve the problem. I think if deer are eating out of the bird feeders, that is, you know, that's a problem, but is it causing damage to the neighbors? That's the next issue. I don't know the answer to that question. So I don't know if we can make people hang their bird feeders higher because maybe they can't reach.
I was going to say, Mr. Quinn, also with the bird height, or the bird feeder height, what I see more times than not is the squirrels knock all the bird seed out onto the ground.
Yeah,
And
that's
deer are gonna
true.
Get to it anyhow.
Okay, and we don't want to get down to the specifying what type of bird feeder.
Right.
Okay, so, all right, I'll pull that back.
Commissioner Lamb?
I just have two things to add. One, I think, is it's important to be clear that, and I agree with Councilman Rose, I mean, actually the height, it does, because the deer can eat directly out of a bird feeder. And what I mentioned, I think, at the committee meeting was my little backyard now is completely fenced in, and it's absolutely amazing to me, because no deer could come in, that I don't have to fill the bird feeder but once a week now. And I used to have to fill my bird feeders every day, because the deer would simply eat it. But my point is that the height then doesn't matter in a way, because you'd have to, everything has to be connected to one of two things. It has to be creating a nuisance, that bird feeder, or it has to be the cause of damage to someone's property. So it's not, the ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Huber, but it's not that you can't feed these animals. It isn't that. It is if you feed them and it causes any of these problems, then that needs to be attended to.
Correct.
And then the one specific question I had for you, Greg, is we listed that you can only feed songbirds in the ordinance, correct?
I believe that's what we said. to
No, I mean,
prevent ducks
the
and
ordinance
geese.
says is songbirds. But there are some birds, I think, that are naturally, people do feed, for example, like a crow. A crow, and I think it's songbirds because you presume then the other birds are birds that are generally called like fowl, like, you know, domestic or non-domestic, like geese, chickens, them. But like a crow is not a songbird, but it is a bird that people would feed in a bird feeder. And there's a number of other birds that fall into that same category. So just, maybe we don't need to address that, but when I was taking a harder look at the ordinance after the meeting, I thought that there are some disparities there.
There are, but again, I think the goal would be, you know, you have to start somewhere, as you mentioned. But I don't know, I don't see many, maybe I'm just naive to the fact, I don't see many people feeding crows that often. But feeding geese, yes, I see that happen a lot.
My friend Nancy feeds the crows.
But hopefully that, you know, especially around the lakes, I guess the geese would be the ones that would be fed.
Crows actually work with tools. Crows are quite amazing. I
They
mean,
are
they
amazing.
use tools.
They also
But-
eat peanuts.
But I haven't seen many of them, at least where I live, but maybe they're in other areas of the city. I don't know. But anybody else, Denny?
Yeah, I definitely will support this ordinance. As Mr. Huber explained at the meeting last week, these are only going to be for extreme cases, where there is actually documentation that by you feeding whatever animal it is causing you harm on your property, your neighbor's property. It doesn't have to be a direct neighbor, it can be, a neighbor a couple, houses down. And I gave an example that in my neighborhood, there was somebody that fed not just deer, but raccoons and all animals. And I'd gotten complaints, and that's when I brought several years ago, 10 years ago or whatever, because two of the neighbors, and I went out and looked at it, when the soil was damp or wet, every night when these people would put the feed out, they basically lost their front and side yards from the deer hoof marks. And they talked to the people that were feeding the deer. I talked to them a couple times. And we had nothing to go on because there was nothing in place that the city could address that. The same thing with the geese. The geese are, they don't leave tracks as much, but they leave droppings, a lot of droppings. And I've had several residents around, not the lake that I live on as much, but some of the other lakes throughout the city where there was people actually feeding the geese, was worrying about the health issues, because the geese can cause, when they're swimming in the water and they leave their droppings in the water, can cause some real lung issues for people that try to, but we had nothing in place. And again, these are isolated cases, which Mr. Huber described as extreme cases, that I will support it because I think then at least the city has, and I don't think they're going to be going out there and, as it was explained by the mayor, Mr. Huber, if there's something brought up that the police will go out and talk to the residents, try to get them to stop feeding those particular animals. And from there, they receive a letter, maybe a second letter, before a citation would be issued. So yes, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Hare?
No question, but I support this because I think this is a start, especially for those people that are blatantly feeding massive piles of food to the animals and bringing them into the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'll make a motion, move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next one we have is 23073, amend Salaries and Benefits Code 3105, add one full-time dispatcher for the police department. I know this came out of your committee, Danny.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk and then have the chief talk, or?
No, I just, we've talked to address it a couple of times in health, safety, and sanitation, and I believe the Chief Kenny's request is reasonable, and I understand why the request is there. The mayor also gave his opinion, and it was moved out of the committee to finance, and I will support it at this time.
Thanks, chief.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'll give a brief description of what I'm asking for the audience benefit or anyone who wasn't at the Health, Safety, Sanitation Committee hearing. We're requesting the addition of one full-time dispatcher. We're currently at 10 full-time dispatchers. Prior to 2010, we were at 9 full-time dispatchers, so we haven't had an addition of manpower since 2010. Since that time, our surrounding communities have increased in population significantly, and accordingly, their safety services have increased in personnel as well. Montville Township has increased in officers, Medina Township has increased in officers, and with that increase in population and manpower in those respective departments, that has also increased the amount of work in our communications center. So we're asking for this 11th dispatcher to help spread out some of the work and give us an effective relief factor when we have call-offs, vacations, sick time, and when we do need to hire personnel. If we get short 1 or 2 positions, it really puts us in a bind. So we're respectfully asking for the amendment of the salary and benefits code and an appropriation to fund this position. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for the chief?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-108 is the Communications Radio Council upgrade for the police department. Chief, you're back on.
Thank you, Mr. President. Both these next items are regarding an upgrade in our communications center. Our current radio consoles, we have 3 of them. They're Motorola consoles. They've been in service for close to 20 years. They're end of life. When we have issues with them, they have to source parts on eBay. They aren't made by the manufacturer anymore, so we have to upgrade those consoles. We've got a quote here from Harris Communications. That is the vendor who also provides the radio system that we're currently operating on, which is the county radio system. It's a Harris system as well, so it's proprietary to these specific consoles. We're requesting the funding and permission to purchase these consoles. We're not requesting a new appropriation. We've been saving our carry forward for the past 2 years for this purchase.
Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-109, Communications Dark Fiber Services Agreement and Service Fees. Chief?
Thank you. This is the network connection. The Harris radio system here for the county, the core of that radio system is in Parma. The county pays a lease fee to use that core. This fiber connection will provide that connection for our consoles here in our dispatch to hit the core up in Cleveland, and then it brings our radio traffic back down here into the county. So this is a monthly fee, so that gives us the capability to have that network connection to Parma.
Any questions?
Mr. President, thank you. Thank you, Chief, for bringing this up. A couple of questions regarding, number one, redundancy for the use of the consoles, and then redundancy within the network loop, however you want to, is that a part of this?
Yes, sir, it is.
So we can move to Brunswick if they have the same?
Well, currently, the only dispatch centers that are on this system is Medina County Sheriff's Office
Okay.
and us. So there is redundancy built in. If our system goes down, we can go to the county sheriff's office, and it is identical to what our system looks like, and vice versa. If their system goes down, they can come to our dispatch center and operate out of there, or we can pick up the slack for them and just, we have that continuity of service that if either center goes down, we can bring that back up. A future build-out for this system is in-place redundancy. So if one of the department's fiber connection goes down, we can establish a VPN point-to-point from the sheriff's office to Medina PD, and of course vice versa, so that if one of those main network connections go down, we can roll over to the redundant VPN connection back to either Medina PD or the sheriff's office.
Okay. And then with regard to the loop itself going to Parma, it's just one pipe? Is there another, like, I don't know what the name of this company is, Dark Fiber Services, okay, but say, like, is there an Armstrong type thing to say Dark Services go down? Can we use like another fiber provider to keep that connection going to Parma?
No, and that's where the redundancy with the sheriff's office would come in. If our pipe gets disconnected for some reason, that VPN between the sheriff's office and us would light up, and we would be able to go network our traffic through them. And again, if their pipe gets shut off, they can VPN to us and network their traffic through us.
Okay. All right,
So
thank
it's
you.
separate strands.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-110 fiscal year 23 CDBG allocation grant. Andrew, is it?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. This is our program year 23 Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, application. We held a public hearing regarding the allocation on May 5th to provide information, explain the program requirements, and discuss proposed projects. There was also a second public hearing on May 19th to announce our selected projects. You have in your request there the two activities we've selected. The first is Medina County Public Transit for general operating costs of $75,000. And the second is City of Medina Code Enforcement for $45,000, and that would be focused in our low to moderate income areas. This round of the CDBG, we're only allowed to apply for 2 different activities. It was previously 3, so we had to whittle it down there. The emergency clause was requested as the application is due on June 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. Rose?
in the past, we've worked with Brunswick on this CDB, yeah, those letters. CDBG.
For our CHIP application.
Oh, CHIP.
We work with Brunswick, it's a
Okay.
different acronym.
All right,
Yeah.
that's different from this, okay, all right. Thank you, sorry. Too many acronyms.
Any other questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-111, increase PO 23-1070, R&T Fence Inc. for the parks. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jansen's coaching a game again tonight. So this request is to increase PO 231070 by $18,500, making the new total $20,000. This is to repair or replace damaged backstop fencing and baseline fencing at Reagan Park and Fred Greenwood Park per the attached quotes, which you all have. Many of the fences were damaged over the years by soft toss practice, which causes the fences to bow out as a result of being hit repeatedly. R&T Fence Incorporated has successfully performed many repairs and new installations on the athletic fields for our parks, and they're able to make these repairs very soon.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-112, purchase of a 2024 Mack Teeny front loader for the sanitation department. Mr. Pacoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. So during the budget process that we discussed 2 months ago in March, we talked about replacing the front loader. The one it would replace would be a year 2000 Mack, so it served the city for 23 years. John was a little hesitant, the superintendent, to replace this right away because we bought that 13-yarder, but the prices continue to go. I mean, we were a little taken aback. This is $386,000 for a front loader, and that's a lot of money, but it's the price of doing business, and we won't see this until 2024. It is a 2024 vehicle. It'll be a 28-yard compactor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-113, increase PO 230930, Wing and Lake Erie for the engineering department. Patrick?
Thank you. As you know, we're currently under construction with West Smith Road. Part of that is installing a new water line throughout the whole corridor, and part of that is crossing underneath the railroad there, just east of Huntington, between Huntington and Elmwood. Railroad requires us to hire their flaggers anytime we're on site doing work within the rail right-of-way. We unfortunately are having a very difficult time. The bore is not going well. We found a unexpected object that basically is slowing us down, so we have to extend more days to get this done, which means more flaggers.
I noticed a big hole in the road, so, yeah. Is there any questions?
What was the object?
That's what I wanted to know.
It's some sort of buried utility. We've exposed it. It's a steel pipe with conduit inside. So far, none of the utilities are claiming it. We think it's Frontier, but they don't believe it is. They have trouble locating theirs. So we don't know. It's a buried utility.
Oh, yeah, right.
So we're going to have to move our bore. It's the long and short of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah. You can always cut it, I guess.
It happens, we hit it just underneath the railroad tracks. This is a 340-foot bore. We went about 165, 170 feet, and where we hit it is directly below the tracks. So we can't dig it up.
Oh, my.
Oh, that's true.
Maybe that's why it's still there.
All right, any other comments?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-114, increase of PO 23-840 for Rocco Masonry for the Streets Department. Mr. Pacoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. So to date, we've had, we replaced and repaired 3 driveway aprons and numerous sidewalks, specifically on Salem Court, where we had some issues with the storm sewer manhole, and also tree lawn trees that were, the roots were affecting the sidewalks there in Ward 4. cleaned that up, and then we had a few more that were recently brought to our attention in Ward 3. So we're evaluating, and after further investigation, we have an obligation there, so want to increase this PO and handle a couple more aprons that are affected by the storm sewer.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else that needs to come before the Finance Committee this evening? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.